Hello, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I'm your streamer. I am a longtime Python developer, software engineer. I do this for a living. I'm someone who can teach you about Python. We are working on a software as a service. Software as a service is membership kind of sites that you'd pay for online to provide some kind of service. The one I work on is a side project called College Connector. College Connector is for helping admissions people stay up with college applications and help their students to keep track of that stuff. It's not super important that you be well versed in college admissions to follow along with what we do, because we spend most of our time in the code. But just so that you know that that's the domain of what we're working in. So I'll be talking about schools and schedules and deadlines and that sort of thing, but I will always make sure to introduce the concepts as necessary before diving in too deep into the actual coding. So this channel is all about, this stream I should say, is all about teaching people how to code and getting a bit of my side project done at the same time. So it's designed to be open for chat. If you have questions, if you join in, in fact I will drop in some notes so to let people know if you have any questions. Let me know. But that's what we want to do here. We're teaching about how to use Django, a very popular web application framework in the Python ecosystem. This website is something that is more than the tutorial that you'll find on the Django site. So it has more things to consider. And by having more things to consider, I think it also has more things that it has the potential to show. We go over how to add features to an active running site and explore what we can do. So you're welcome to chat. I just ask that you be civil. If you can't be civil, don't chat. Otherwise, let's get going. So, I should note that you can follow me on social media like Twitter or YouTube. I have accounts there. I also have a website, a personal website where I do technical writing, write about Python, Vim, all sorts of random topics, and a mailing list that you can keep up with what's going on with me as well. So I believe some of those tags are somewhere in one of the corners of my video so that you can find more information out. If you enjoy what you find here tonight, I'd just ask that you follow on Twitch so you know when I'm streaming in the future, so that you can join and be part of the conversation. Or if you're catching the recording on YouTube, check me out. I stream on Twitch Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and I will be available for questions at that time, obviously. So we're going to get into our code project for the evening. And I guess I should start with what we did last week. Last week we were, or 2 weeks ago, I should say. 2 weeks ago, I keep tripping up on that, we were adding a feature flag system to the project. Feature flags are a really cool way to control what your users see. So if you have a feature that is in development, but you don't want to keep it off from your main code base for a long time, you can use feature flags as a mechanism to control what the user sees or what you see. So if you're rolling something out and you want to roll it out to a small population of your users or your customers, you can do that. If you just want to flip the switch and make it something available to your customers, you can do that too. So the feature flag system that we're using is called Django Waffle. And my previous video, which is up on YouTube, I don't have the episode number off the top of my head, I think it's 14, is all about how to add Django Waffle into your project. We went through the process of configuring it. I showed a bit of how we might use the flag system for a project, but I had something come up this past couple weeks that is going to divert us to where we're going to be implementing. So let's take a look at the actual feature that we'll be implementing for the evening. I have a need to be able to deactivate accounts. I have people that are an individual that's trialing, and I don't want to have to be the only support conduit to say if they're not happy with the trial or it's not offering them the full features that they want, that they would have to contact me directly to get out of their Stripe subscription. in the current interface, there is no way to deactivate your own account. So the feature that I want to add today, and I'll go ahead and actually drop this GitHub issue into the chat. So this is what we're working on tonight. So this GitHub issue, and I use GitHub for my project. It's got all the code, so if you want to review anything, you're welcome to review it all. It's all up there. The secrets are encrypted, but everything else is freely available to view and modify as you see fit on your own fork. But I also use the GitHub issue system to keep track of the work that needs to happen. I can use it as a mini place to a little place to specify the actual work items and kind of enumerate the bits that I think have to happen to make a feature complete. So I've done that here with this issue 372, and it's all about deactivating the account. So there's a few pieces to deactivating the account, which we'll walk through in the code in detail, but I want to give you an overview of my thought process of how I'm going to pursue this. The first thing that I think about is the actual user experience for doing account deactivation. If you're deactivating an account, it's usually for a reason. You're either dissatisfied with the service or you can't pay for it. Whatever the reason, you may not be in the best place or the best spirit. So I don't want to have people walk away with a terrible experience, because that sort of guarantees that they'll never come back. There's maybe a chance that they won't come back anyway, but I can guarantee you that if you make it hard to deactivate your account and painful, people are going to remember that, and it's going to leave a bad taste in their mouth. So I want to do this tastefully and put account deactivation not as a big barrier, but enough of there's enough of a gate so that you actually have to think about it before you deactivate your account. I don't want anybody clicking into their settings and clicking a deactivate button by accident, and suddenly they're out of the system and aren't able to get back in without having some help from support. So the thought process that I want to have is essentially in the account settings page to have a deactivate area that is got some nice warning colors. So use a red color to kind of indicate that, hey, you're about to do something that it's going to be hard to walk away from, and put the pros there that will give them a clear indication of what's happening, so that they know exactly what they're getting when they deactivate. So there's no anxiety about do I owe anything? I don't want any of that kind of confusion. I want to be very clear from that front. And then I want to have one sort of confirmation. The simplest confirmation I could think of was to ask them to insert their email address, type it out as they're kind of signing off to say, yes, I'm choosing to deactivate my account. And because I'm asking that in a form version, I don't want to have to have them remember their email address, because maybe they have multiple and they've used different ones. So the deactivate screen will probably also say, here is your email address that we have on file, so that they can very quickly either copy paste that in or type it out if it's something that they're so used to doing. So I think having that sort of experience where it's a very simple form that asks for one piece of information just to confirm that they're serious, and then deactivates after that, will be a reasonable user experience. What has to happen on the backend side of this is, after they've consented to doing that, we need to cancel the subscription that's created in Stripe that does the recurring billing, to make sure that they are not billed in the future. That's the prime thing, because you don't want to charge someone for a service that they're no longer desiring to use. And then we need to do some administrative work on the College Conductor site to ensure that after they've deactivated the account, the service is no longer available to them. I don't need people deactivating the account and then finding out, oh, if I just log in again, I have access to everything that when I was active, so why was I even paying for this? So that'll be an opportunity to maybe ask for reactivation if someone has a deactivated account, but we have to go through the process of logging the user out, making sure that they're out of the system everywhere, and then displaying some information to them if they attempt to log back in, saying, hey, glad you're signing back in. Here's how you can join up again. So that's sort of the flow, the user experience that I want to provide, because I think it provides both a nice off-ramp that is a pleasant experience, and as well as a potential on-ramp back to the service if that's what they choose to do. So the starting place for all of that, though, is in my mind, the easiest place to start from is the actual form that we want to display in the account settings. Everything else after that is sort of under the surface and details that the user doesn't care about, and obviously very important to me as the administrator, but that's where we're going to be. So let's start from there. So my editor is Vim, that's what we're going to be looking at. And we are going to start from the account settings page, the template for that. So it should be, where should it be? Well, let's search for account settings. It's probably what I called it. It is. And while we're doing this, let's also look at what does that page currently look like today locally. And I'm going to go ahead and close the production site so I don't get confused about why is this not showing on my settings page, because that kind of stuff can happen pretty easily. You forget which version of your site you're on, and it can leave you scratching your head, which we don't need. So we're going to go to where I'm serving the site from locally. And you can see now, well, I think you can see on the URL bar that we're serving this from localhost at port 8080, which is my local web server, which I started up using a tool called Honcho, which is right here. It starts up the web server, it starts up a background worker, it starts up the front end processes to like do cascading style sheets and all that sort of generation. All of that's there and available. And now we can interact with the site, not be affecting real data, and just play around with things. So let's go into where the settings page is. Settings over here is over here on the site, and when we click on it, you can see there's not a lot of settings. So College Connector has a very minimal feature set at the time being. That's partly by design, partly driven by not a lot of usage, which is okay, but it's got enough to have a settings page at least already. So this is the place I want to hang it from. And aesthetically, I would like the deactivate settings to look very similar to this Google Drive settings, to have like a box that's here, that there will be some text to say like you're about to deactivate your account. And then the difference will be right here where it says Google Drive is authorized. We will instead have a form input and a red deactivate button that prompts them to click it once they've entered that information. So that's where we're going to put stuff. I also want to be able to commit this stuff at any time, so that I can continuously roll out deployments to my site and make modifications and never be blocked by what I'm currently developing in case there was a bug that I have to suddenly fix. So the way that we're going to handle that is through the use of the feature flag system that I mentioned at the beginning. And the feature flags can come in a variety of formats. They can either be done with inside the Python code, or they can happen at the template level, which is where we're going to start. So in our template, we're going to use this load waffles tags to bring in the template tags that are from Waffle to introduce our feature flag. So the first thing we need to say is loads. I believe it's loads. Nope, just load, sorry. And we're going to do waffle tags. Okay, so if you're not familiar with template tags, they're a Django feature that allows you to add functions and other kinds of things into the template engine so that they can be used. For example, like this, when you're doing the logic, like here's the user that's been added by something, but this is not an example of a tag. This is an example of something that's been inserted into the context. But if we have an actual function that we want to call, that would usually come from template tags. And Waffle, the project, has added their own template tags that you can use, which includes the flag tag that we're going to take advantage of in just a second. So we want to put our change right after the card UI. So coming back to the page, this thing, if we inspect it, is, I'm using the Bootstrap UI toolkit, and this whole thing is considered a card. Okay, so I'm going to start. The easiest thing to do is I'm going to take that tag, I'm going to replicate it and put it right here. So if we do that and come back and refresh the page, you'll see it listed twice. So I'm already seeing something that I want to have done differently. I think I want to have some kind of spacing between them. So let's go up to this card up here and say margin Y. So that's these are just utility helpers that are part of Bootstrap, and we want to give it some amount of margin between the cards. That way the sections are at least differentiated. Okay, so now that we've got the appropriate amount of margin on this, what we need to do next is then take our new flag system. So the thing that was added by waffle tags is flag. And this is where we need to provide a waffle flag name that we're going to use. And I learned this from this particular technique from one of the companies that I worked at that uses Django, is that when you add flags to a project, if you do choose to go with feature flags, at some point you're going to want to clean up the flag. And so you need, or it's beneficial to have some kind of name that is memorable enough, or searchable enough, I should say, to quickly find these flags. Because when you're in cleanup mode, if you forget flags, you can forget about them much later and wonder, what is this thing doing? And that's not quite the place you want to be. So the thing that I learned from my previous employer was to use _flag in the name. That's just the convention that company used, but I find that it's a good one. Some kind of indicator to yourself that in the future, when you're looking for the flag, you can say, I know that it at very minimum has my pattern of _flag in it. So if you called it something silly, like super common in Django, like user, at least if you called it user flag, you're going to have a decent chance of finding it. So the name I'm choosing for this feature is deactivate flag. And by doing just this much and putting that there, what will happen if I refresh this page is this Google Drive thing should go away. And the reason it went away is that my local database, and this is an important part of flags, my local database does not have the flag. And this is an extremely important quality because you don't want to have accidentally turn on a flag. So you have to opt into usage of flags. And that's where we need to go over to the admin, the Django admin, and look at the flag system that's available to us, add the flag, and then we'll see it come back. So we're going to come in here and create a new flag, and I'm going to give it the same exact name. And well, did I spell? I did not. Deactive. No, Matt. Deactivate. Is that right? Yes, that's better. Now with more spelling. So we want the deactivate flag, not deactive flag. And For our local purposes here, let's go ahead and turn it on. When it comes time to do your production rollout to your site, maybe you want to only turn it on for a small subset or something like that. Let's imagine that we were going to do that. For example, let's imagine that we wanted this to be available to our staff. Maybe we work on a team of like 20 people or so, and they all have accounts on our site that are marked in the Django authentication system as staff level users. The important thing to make that work is to set this everyone status to unknown. And that just tells Waffle, hey, you're not giving an exact answer here. You need to look further down the list on whether or not this particular user should have access to see this flag. So if you set it to no, that's explicitly no for everyone. Even if the user has a check here, if they're a super user, it doesn't matter. The no means no. And I think there's a note under here, leave as unknown to use normally. That's maybe a tiny bit vague, but that's the idea that they're trying to get across. So if we want to do unknown, that's how we do subsets and groups and all of these other options that are down below. If we don't care, if we want to treat it more like a switch, then we can just say yes. For the purpose of a local test and a local running site, I'm just going to say yes. So we save it. And once it is saved, we now have the deactivate flag. It's turned on for everyone. So if we come over to this site and refresh this, now we have our Google Drive, which will eventually become our deactivate section. So now that we have the flag in place, we're free to operate on everything inside of this flag with the confidence that if I committed this code today, my production and deployed it, my production users would not see that. So even if I left it in this kind of broken state of just repeating what shows up as Google Drive, only someone who has the flag turned on will be able to see it. And since only administrators have the ability to manage the flags, that means that your production users shouldn't see it unless you explicitly opt into it. So let's take our card, now that we have our flag, and let's start to modify it as we see fit. So we want to deactivate account. And we need to tell them what is going to happen. So I guess I should phrase it with, I don't want to make it seem like it's a certainty, because I don't want to encourage people to deactivate. I'd like them to continue using the service. I think that it's valuable. So I'm not going to go straight out and say, you are about to. I want to kind of phrase it as if you're choosing to do this. So if you deactivate your account, we will halt your subscription, and you will no longer be charged for College Conductor. Seems like a decent starting point. Let's see how it looks. I want to give them some bit to say as well that I'm not going to go through the process right now of automating the reactivation. That's a little step too far probably. So let's say, please contact support if you wish to reactivate your account. And here's probably a good place to link to, well, no, that's not important. They're not deactivated yet. I was thinking about putting a link to the support page, but the support page it's on the bottom of every page as contact. So, and it brings us to this very straightforward form. So if anybody ever was in that position, I think they'd be able to figure out what that means. That's an assumption, but since I'm not trying to optimize for the reactivation path, that seems reasonable enough. So let's check how it looks. That looks decent. And then let's ditch this stuff. Well, I'm gonna need a button, so let's ditch the logic stuff at least and see what it looks like. This is what the other path is. So this is authorize Google Drive, and I want to change to a danger button. That's the red button in Bootstrap, and we'll say deactivate count. Okay. And I'm just making little tweaks here and there to see how this stuff looks along the way. Let's jump over to Bootstrap itself. And I think there's a way to color cards. I'd like the whole framing around it to also be colored, just to give an extra level of caution. Wow, that's pretty intense. This is better. Like an outline. Let's see what other options are there. There might be some. I want some balance between that fully colored thing, because that's just too much color, versus the outline. Although maybe I'd rather be a more subdued look than bold and in your face. I don't want to yell at people with the colors. So this system seems to say, here's the example with red. So they're saying you can do this by using border colors and setting font colors and stuff. So let's look at the red example down below. So they do card body text danger and border danger. Okay. So they did that on the card itself. Let's come up to the card. Let's say border danger. And I think I want just the header text to be like that. Probably want the body copy to be still black. I like the contrast of black. Okay, that seems reasonable. Let's look at the card stuff one more time, see if there's any other options. I'm wondering what. Let's just play with the header of the danger just to see what it looks like. It might be too much. So they're using text white BG danger. The text white. Yeah, I don't think that's too overwhelming. I think what was overwhelming is when they had like the actual body in red too. That was just way too much for me. So, okay, this is kind of how I want this to feel. We haven't made a place to submit this form to yet, so that seems reasonable to have it as is until we're ready for this. So let's put in a little bit more of the instruction about what they need to do, because they need to deactivate their account by, well, I don't know that this is going to work quite like we expect. Let's try adding the card text again, see what that does. I don't know how you can do multiple paragraphs, or this is going to be weird. So to confirm your account deactivation, please enter your email. Okay, that worked. And then and then we can change this. This page, I should note, is only accessible to authenticated users. So we can safely access the email that's in their account right here from the user that's injected into the context for every view. Okay. And while we're here, let's make that strong, just so they can read it. I don't want there to be any confusion about this. So we're very close to like the styling of it that I want for this page. And I think the last thing we need is an input. And then we have a bunch of markup to do after that, like putting a form around this stuff and making views and making Django forms and all of that. But the actual look of this, I think, is pretty close. So let's say input, well, I don't want to mess this part up because this Django Bootstrap has their own styling. We don't need an input group, we just need a basic input. Okay, well, let's start from, unless there's a simpler one, I think their styling is to put the label above. Just kind of reading some of the stuff to make sure that I keep it simple. Because I also don't want to make this be a huge amount of space at the same time. We have some options available to us that are inline. So they're talking about form groups. Let's just see what this looks like if we copy this whole form group in there. And I'll reformat this in a second. Okay. I'm probably we can ditch the second one. And we want to move this into the form because this is now going to be a button instead of an anchor tag. And we want it to be a button of type submit. So it's a standard submission button. Now, I think if I did this right, it should look exactly the same. Yeah, cool. So now if we inspect it, we'll see that it's a standard button. So we need to say, what do we need to say still? How does this look without the label? Maybe is one thing to check. Yeah, I like that. And then we'll change the placeholder to just read email. Okay. So essentially the flow is going to be they type or they paste, copy paste, their username, which in this case is nowhere at no reply. That's what I use for this dummy account. And then they would click deactivate account. And if it works, then we do all the stuff on the back end and cancel subscriptions, all of that jazz. Log them out and redirect them to a deactivated page, which is a nice page that will say, "Sorry to see you go. Hope you found College Conductor useful. If you want to sign up again, contact support." And if it doesn't work, like maybe they leave off the com, our form that we're going to have will validate that, hey, wait a minute, this email address doesn't match what you put in here. Was this an accident? Were you trying to deactivate and it just didn't work, or what? So I think that's a good spot for the moment. Probably want to call this email. Actually, it's going to be a name since it's an input. And we'll come back and we'll fill it in with our actual form. But this is enough of the UI to get started on the actual code bits that need to happen. So let's stop. Let's look at our issue and see if we've met that. Okay, we have added a deactivate section to the settings page. That's what I just did. It's not complete and we'll have to test it all, but we have a starting point. So we're going to want this to be a post method just to complete this. And wow, I'm totally blanking out on the other thing that goes in with form method. Action. I don't know why I was blanking on that. So action is going to be the URL of our view that actually will do the deactivation checking, and then we'll redirect to the deactivated page. So, but that doesn't exist yet. So for the moment, I'm going to leave it as action with an empty string, which just means that for now, it's going to try and post to the same settings page. Won't work, but we've got all the placeholders here for a fully working form. And yeah, I feel pretty good about this. Kind of wish I could subdue that red. Red's pretty bright. Kind of going back and forth on maybe it should just be the red text. Let's see. Let's check that out one more time. Okay. Somehow that feels a little, just slightly classier to me, because it also gives you the clear indication that the call to action, if you're choosing to deactivate, is not the header. Like, that doesn't need to be loud and in your face. It's the deactivate account button. Okay. Great. So let's move on to the actual view. I'm going to take this in a few steps, and Process of this is going to look, we're going to go through this layer by layer. We're going to start by creating a view that's going to be connected to this deactivate form. Once the view is in place and we can verify that it goes somewhere and actually does some kind of redirection on failure, then I think we can actually introduce the form that will do the real checking. And the form itself, the save method of the form, conventionally that's what you use in a Django form, is when a form is valid, you have a save method, and the save does the action of what the form was supposed to do. That's where we will cancel Stripe subscriptions, that's where we will deactivate accounts, that's where we will log out users. All of that will happen in a single place. So let's get going on making our view. The place that I want to put this is in the accounts application. So I have an accounts, it's got sign up stuff, it's got authorization stuff, it's got settings, those sort of things. All of that is related to the user's account. So it's a very natural place to want to put the deactivate page as well. And so we want to start by doing some test-driven development, and we're going to open up the test file. Actually, we don't have enough real estate to go vertically, so let's do a horizontal split here instead. That way we can see clearly the chunk of code on both sides. So we are at, there's the test for sign up, there's the test for the dashboard, user settings, authorize, the callback. So these are in order of how I introduce them into the file. I'm going to put the deactivate view at the bottom for lack of a better place to put it. So we're also going to put the test at the bottom. So we'll call this test deactivate and derive from the test case class that I have. Can't remember if I put string. No, I didn't. All right, so we want to check a couple of things. The first thing that we want to do is, you have to be logged in to deactivate. It doesn't make sense if you're not. So the first check is to take an unauthenticated request. That's what this line does. And we're going to call deactivate, and it's going to redirect to the login page if it doesn't exist. So let's try and run this test. Okay, this makes perfect sense that it's reacting this way because I haven't created a view yet. So it's a very natural response that the views module is going to say, oh, well, deactivate doesn't exist. What are you talking about? And Vim was trying to tell me, that's what the little red thing on the side that popped up from my linting checker, saying it knew the code well enough to say, hey, wait a minute, there's no deactivate function in this views module, so why are you calling this? Okay, so we're going to do the simplest thing that will work. So we're going to create deactivate. It's going to, well, it's going to do, we'll just say copy a lot of what's here. It's going to take a request. It's going to return, it's not a guarantee that it's going to be a redirect because it might be coming back to the same settings page if there's an error. So it could just be a response that's reloading the settings page that will include the error message at the top. So we can't definitively say it will be the HTTP response redirect type. Instead, we'll have to use just the more generic HTTP response. And I don't really care right now what it returns at the moment, but let's give it a documentation string. We'll say deactivate user account. Wow. Okay, so now if we come back to our test and run the test, it should fail. So we did a redirect, but it wasn't the redirect we were looking for because I didn't include the decorator that actually enforces that a login be required. So now if I put that decorator on the top and we go back to our test, try it again, it's going to pass. So I now have the confidence that deactivate view, which isn't doing anything yet, will have the ability to only allow logged in users. So what else do we need to do here? I think that might be enough for now. That even though this is wrong, we don't really want to redirect back to the settings page. We want to just re-render the settings page. Yeah, I think we are ready to move on to the form. So this, I don't want to make this seem like overly complicated. There's not a lot of complication that goes on here. It's been a while since I've reviewed one of these, and so we're going to see a similar pattern that shows up in a fair number of these. And here's a good example. So the process of a view that uses a form is like this. It's going to, well, maybe this is not a good example because this one's returning a JSON response for specialized reasons. Let's see if we can do a different one. So let's look in the planner views, which I know has better examples. So add student is going to be a very typical example of what this will look like. We need to put the form into the view. And this is making me realize that I've already missed something, and I've already kind of misled you a little bit. I need to put the form into the settings view. So that's where the form is going to populate with the data that we care about, like namely the email parameter. And if they're incorrect and need to re-render it, you need to put that back in there. So this is a little trickier by having it's not all happening on the same page. It's kind of splitting the form across two different things. So I'm just trying to think of the best way to do this. We know that this will definitely need a form. The processing will do the validation and the checking. So let's start with this. Let's create the deactivate form here in the deactivate view. Let's make sure that we handle the validation logic correctly of validating that the email that's provided as the data matches the email that is the user. And after that, once that's working and that logic, that core logic is there, then we can hook the form also into the settings view where it will be needed additionally. So let's come back here, and we're going to get out of our test views file for the moment. We're going to go into our forms. And you see the pattern of forms is, this is a Django feature. And you declare the things that you care about that are part of the form. And you run some cleaning on the form if it needs to do some validation. And if the validation fails, then it would display errors to the user. But you also make this kind of conventional save method that I talked about, so that when you do your form success condition, you would just call save on it, and it would do all of the the bulk. So like this, for example, the sign up form that we're looking at here is someone has just signed up. They've provided all the necessary Stripe stuff. So we go ahead and create the customer on Stripe, and then we create their subscription. So the deactivate is almost going to be the inverse of this, of we're not going to create, delete the Stripe customer that's still valuable for a historical record, but we will deactivate their subscription in case they ever want to come back. We would reactivate the subscription and reconnect them with their customer account. So we want to put our new form right here, and I'm going to call it deactivate form. And it's a standard form, not based off any kind of model. And let's see, we're going to use an email field, just like above. It's going to have the same restrictions, although I don't know that that's strictly necessary, because the validation that we're going to do is checking against an already validated email, and anything else will be rejected. So actually, let's delete that stuff, because I don't think we really want it. So we have one email field, and the other bit that's going to be required is the user. So eventually we'll have to create that. But let's get back to doing our test-driven development. Let's create a new test case. Class test deactivate form. That's the difference from the view from earlier. It's going to be a test case. And let's think for a moment about what tests we need. So there's, for the time being, if we're worrying just about validation, there's not really a lot to do. There is, we want to test that I'm not going to test Django itself. Like the fact that I put required true there, I don't need to test that Django is able to do what it says. So there is a test case where I'm not even providing the email, but I trust that Django can do that validation properly. So if someone tries to submit and there is no email, it will give an appropriate error message for that. But I want to test the mismatched email case where the email does not match what the user has on record. And I want to also test the matching email case. So let's create a new user. And I'm going to use my user factory, using Factory Boy, which is a quick way to create user models. And it populates it with like dummy data. So actually we could do self-assert true, provide false as the response, and print out user email. And you can see it's made an email address that we can use. So to make our test, we will create the form and then run the is valid method, I think is what we really are looking for. Yeah, form is valid. And we're just going to assert that is valid is false. That's the whole test. Okay, the form is the deactivate form. And to do this properly, we're going to need a user, but I'm going to stick with TDD for a moment. And we have our setup, and I like to keep my test structured in an arrange, act, and assert pattern. So I want to have a very clear place where the action is taking place. This is the form is valid. And in fact, we're going to need some, come on, data to go into this. And there's no data yet, so data equal data. And we do want this to be false. Coming down here, we want to import the deactivate form. Okay. Need to type annotation of, doesn't really matter. I don't care. We'll add, forgot we need type annotations on the actual tests themselves. So I'm getting rid of most of the warnings for now, trying to get us to just a clean slate. So let's run this test. This test passed, but can you guess why it passed? You don't have to guess, I can tell you. The reason why it passed is that when we called is valid and we provided it with an empty dictionary, we gave it no email. And down here, we said one of this is required as true, is the email. So right now, we're actually testing that Django is working. That's not what we want to test. We want to test with a real email. So here's where I'm going to actually use the user. I want to guarantee that the user doesn't match. So we're going to use the user email address as part of this and to make something uniquely different. And let's take a format string, and we're going to put in, we're going to prepend no match, and then we're going to take the user email as the second half of that. Okay, so this will guarantee us, because it's basically impossibly unlikely that a random email that I pick will ever match up with a random email that the fake generator will pick, but I want to just guarantee that it will never happen. So by using the same email and prepending it with something that makes that assertion that there's no way these two things could ever match, because I'm deriving the email that's getting passed in from the email that's coming from the fake data. So now if we run this thing, it should actually fail. Okay, because from the form's point of view, since we've done no cleaning of this, we have data that says, this is valid. There's an email that was present. So what we need to do is add, this is where we go into the form, and we're going to add a clean method. And we want to clean the email address. And I always forget the structure of clean. Okay, well, let's start from here. So we want to get the email address from cleaned data, which is where Django puts all the data after it's kind of initially processed it. And this is where we want to check against the user. And if it doesn't match, then we want to fail with a validation error, and that'll be enough. So here's where we have a problem. The form doesn't know who the user is yet, because we didn't pass it in. So really, when we create deactivate form, what we need to do is pass in the user. Okay. So in order to do that, we need to actually take the init method. I'm copying from the other one because it's just easier to reuse it. And what's going to change is this guy is now going to be a user. And we're going to, this is the auth user model. This is the type annotation. And down here, we want to set the user. So this just gives us a hook that when we get into the clean email method, we have a quick, easy access to the email, the user, so that we can do the comparison between email. Okay, so we've pulled out the cleaned email that was submitted in the form. And if we take this, wow, that was some really funky formatting from Black. But okay, that's what it's going to do. This is now, we haven't changed anything, so it's still false, it's still failing. So now we can come in here and say if self user email does not equal email, then we're going to raise a form validation error. So forms validation error. And this is where we want to provide a polite message that will show up to the user. So if they made a mistake and they're deactivating their account, I want to be very careful that they, first of all, see it. Because if they don't see it, if they just like go to this page and they type this in and they, made a quick mistake, that the error message is extremely clear. Because I don't want anybody to come to me and say like, hey, Matt, you're a real jerk. You made it so that I couldn't sign out of this service. That's not cool. So I want to give a very friendly message here, and spell out the differences if I can, or to the best of my ability. So let's say the email address of, we'll use email, does not match the account email of user email. Okay, and this is a format string. Let's do that. Make sure it's a format string. Oops, and this is actually self user email. But the line is too long. Oh goodness, I don't care, Black. This is one where you're just going to get ignored. We'll say no QA. Sometimes it's okay to have strings that are too long. Black can just deal with it, and so can Blake8. Because the alternative is to kind of mangle it and spread it into pieces, and yeah, you can do that, but sometimes it's just not very friendly to do so. So now we've got the cleaning thing. So up here, this should now actually be false and be a passing test. Okay, but we're not done, because there was that scenario where it could have been just an empty email. So the test isn't that great in that it's too generic. Like there's lots of things that could fail that are valid. So let's do, I want to assert that the type of error that's in the errors that come along with the forms, because now the form, after you run the isValid, and if there were errors, Django will populate that form with an errors attribute. And just to prove it, let's say assert in, and I'm going to just put some junk in here, and we'll say form errors. Okay, so the assert in is going to look for a key that matches the structure in form errors. I believe form errors will be a dictionary, but we should see. Okay, so ASDF is not in this dictionary, and here's our good chance to look at what came out of this. So email is that is the key we want to assert on, and there's a list that has the nice error message, and we can see very clearly that no match low Ashley at Hotmail does not match low Ashley at Hotmail, which is good. So to make the test pass, we change this to email. Okay. All right, let's now test kind of the inverse case of this. And here, we don't need to mangle anything. We just want to use user email. And we want to change this to true. Okay, so we've, and actually, I think I want to reverse these. Because I want the test case to read like, here's the happy path, here's the success, and then here's the error case that can happen. And this is a very simple form, so there's not a lot of combinations that can go on here, but we still have a couple of very clear examples. So now it's time to use the form in a larger context. We want to go back to our test views file, back to the bottom, and how do I want to handle this? Well, let's start with what we know. We know we're going to use a deactivate form. We know that that form is going to come in here and it's going to get the data that goes with this. Well, it needs a couple things. We first need request user. So the user that's authenticated is attached to the request, and we made our form so that the user has to be the first parameter that's passed in. And the other thing that we want to do is bind the data from the request post to the data that it gets validated by the form. So that looks like that. We've got a form, it's got the user, it's got the request post data. We're ready to go. And then we can save that. Form isn't used right now, but that's okay. So what should we do? Let's do a test that passes in the email. It's kind of like this, the form test, the happy path of the form test. But this time I want to verify that the user is getting redirected to the deactivated page, which doesn't exist yet, but we can put in a placeholder. So we're going to do, what do we need? Kind of need, I don't think we need a session, but we'll take stuff from up here. So we'll call this just test success. And I need a user. I'm just stealing from other tests because it doesn't hurt. And this is an authenticated get, but really we need an authenticated post. And we don't need the session, I don't think, for this test. So we want our data to be equal to email of user email. Okay. While I'm thinking about it, there's another thing I want to clean up real quick. We added the type annotation here, but now that we've actually filled the data dictionary in with values, we don't need that anymore. So I don't want to have needless type annotations that are just littering the code. Sorry, that was a little tangent. So we have the request. We want to check the response, and we want to call views deactivate the request. This is a post, or should be a post request. And we want to then do the same kind of redirect assertion. But this time, I don't care about login. Let's, for now, that's not really the right answer. This is where we're going to put the deactivated thing. Or index. Somewhere different. That's all I'm really going for. Because if this thing comes through currently, it's going to just redirect to the settings because we're not actually doing anything yet. So this test should fail. That's not good. Why did this test fail or succeed? We have a post. Because that should not work. What's going on? Oh, that was a bad choice. Index is like the one route, which is, it's just a slash, so it's going to match almost anything. How about dashboard? Okay. Finally, we have a failure we can believe in. So the dashboard is where all of the stuff happens for actual authenticated users. It's not where they're going to end up, but it's a decent place to give us a clue that the view is either falling through the bottom and hitting that redirect back to the settings page, or it is going where we want it to go. So that to ensure that it goes where we want it to go, we do the if form is valid. And if it is, this is now where for the moment I'm putting dashboard. Okay. So if we run the same test, now it should pass. Okay, which is good. So it proves that in our scenario where the user typed in their email address in that part of the form, and it came back to the data, and we checked it, and they check out, it validates the form and goes to the dashboard. So here, this spot, this is where we need to do a couple of things. We need to do form save, and that method doesn't exist yet. That's where the Stripe deactivation is going to be. And then we also need to do redirect to a deactivated page, which is basically going to be a static page. And I don't know, I'm trying to decide if we want the form save to do the logout or not, but I'll put it down here so I don't forget it. User logout, because we don't want them to stay logged in and be able to access all sorts of stuff forever. So what is left? I think we actually do want this reverse of the settings, but we need to do something. We need to add a failure message. So here's the problem with splitting this out into two different views. I could have made this so that this all of this verification happened in the settings view. And part of me wonders maybe I should, because there's what other forms am I putting on the settings view? I'll leave it split out as is, just to kind of work through the constraint. But if it was all on the same page, then the process could be like, if it was a post and there were errors, then the errors could be put back into the form and rendered back out to the page to indicate, hey, you messed up the form, but here's your data back. Since we're splitting this out and doing a redirect, that's not as easy. So what I want to do instead is, if we got to this error case, which is anything down here, we want to add an error message that shows up. So add error message. And this is something that should display at the top of the settings page. And it should be that validation message that we saw earlier. I think that would be the right way to go about this. Yeah. So let's see how much. I'm trying to decide how much more we should do. Maybe we should get as far as seeing the form fail and coming back to that settings page with the error message. That's probably a good place to stop for the night. So let's do, this is testing the success path. And a bit like the form, maybe this is a little redundant. You might say I'm over-testing. That would be a fair characterization, perhaps. But the reason I want to do this is the form is going to be just testing, did the validation work correctly? Here, when the form is valid or is not valid, I want to test two things. I want to test, did you get redirected back to the settings page? And did the settings page show the error message that happened because of the bad form validation? So we're going to do, again, our no match here and populate it with the user's email in the same way. So this time I want to confirm that it's coming down to the settings. Good. Okay. The other piece that's missing is what I've had marked here as this to do. And so I'm using the messages framework. And here's an example. So we're going to recycle this a little bit. And so the messages framework is an additional Django app. It's a component of Django that allows you to inject messages in a variety of ways. I think the default is with cookies, so that the cookies can get read out and displayed at rendering time when the request is processed. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I read the messages documentation. The short version is that messages are like the flash things. They're usually called flash messages that appear at the top of a page that an error was occurred. So for this form, I'm going to take advantage of that. I know what goes in this form and that there's only one thing. So the error message that I want to get out of here is from form errors, email, and that, if you remember, that was a list. So I'm comfortable with the fact, even though I'm pulling out from this structure in what seems like seems pretty risky, I'm pretty confident that that error message, if we got this far, will be populated with what we care about. So now we've got this test, but when we run this test now, we're going to get a weird failure, I think. Yeah. So the tests don't like running with the message. It's not, because I'm using a request that I generated from the request factory, it's not running through all the middleware. So the messages framework uses some middleware to make all this work. So if you want to test that a message has occurred, you need to use mocking. So here's an example where we mock out the messages import, like so. And I'm going to go back. Where did that go? Where did you go? Yeah. Okay. So then I'm going to check that add message was called with an error type. And I don't really care too much about the error itself because we're going to test it out. I'm going to prove it that it is. I don't want to like reconstruct the whole error message and assert very specifically. We're just saying that the any value is there. And we need to pass in messages, which is going to have a type of mock, magic mock, pretty sure. Am I right? Yeah. Okay. So let's see how we did. All right. So we've mocked it out. So it's just proving that the test is and matches up with the code that we wrote. It's not a super productive test because I don't necessarily know that with confidence, or it's possible that I wouldn't know with confidence that this was the right API call, but I've used the messages framework enough to know that it's the right API call. So what I want to do right now is try it out. Oh, I guess we need to also, we haven't actually hooked it up anywhere. So we have this deactivate view, and we haven't hooked it up to the URLs of anything. So we need to go to the URLs page and come into the views, and we're going to import deactivate and put it under what do I want to call it? I guess deactivate's fine. Deactivate, deactivate, deactivate. Whoops. So now we have the deactivate view hooked into the URL. So that gives it an actual route. So its deactivate is going to be at collegeconductor.com/deactivate, which is a fine place to be. Like, it might seem a little weird to have it kind of at the root, but remember, this is a view that requires login, so I think that's okay. If we can still do, I could do another test that would require this to be a post, which I probably should, to kind of lock it down even more. I might do that offline. That's not super worthwhile testing, but I think that's enough to get it going. And then we go back to our template, and in the template, we need to come down to that form, and the action for the form, we want to fill it in with a value now, and the value is URL deactivate is the route name that we put in that URLs file. So having this in place, should be enough to test everything this time. So let's start up the web server. Let's go back to our settings page. Refresh the page. Okay, while we're here, before we type anything, I want to inspect and just look at the markup. So, okay, it's got deactivate in there. No idea what, oh, that's LastPass. So deactivate's in there. And let's see if we click it, what happens? Ah, forgot something. All forms in Django need a CSRF token. It's a cross-site request forgery token. It's helpful for preventing bad stuff from happening from your site. You just need it. So we need to do this of CSRF token. Try again. And now if we inspect, you see this hidden token put in here. It makes it harder for bad guys, bad people to do bad things to your website. And it's required for all forms. So let's try this again. Deactivate the account. Okay. Leaving it blank is not the friendliest thing in the world. Maybe there's a way that we could override this default for the blank case. But let's consider the one where they just didn't match. So let's say I'm know-how at noreply.com is what I actually typed instead of nowhere. Deactivate. Okay, this is a pretty clear message telling you why your deactivation didn't work. The email address does not match the account email of that. I might make that slightly better by putting some single quotes around it or call it out, because I don't think I can use HTML markup in the error message, or I don't really want to. So let's do that quickly. We can come down. Where was that? That was in the form, wasn't it? So let's change this to be surround it with quotes. Okay. And try again. Some email.com. Okay. So that without using visual highlighting of strong text, which is a little harder to do in these kind of flash messages, at least for the way I've got it set up currently, by surrounding it in quotes, it kind of calls out to the user, here's what you entered, here's what we expected. I think that's good enough. Okay, now let's try it the other path where they match up. Remember, for now, this is just doing a redirect back to the app page because I haven't done any of the other stuff. Okay, went back to the dashboard, which is the app. That's the right route. So that was the expected behavior. So I feel good about this. This is not done, but it's a lot closer to done. We still have some more work to do to finish it off to make sure that it doesn't do that, that it does all the rest of the stuff. But I think that's a good place to leave it at tonight. Let's check the issue to make sure, see if we can check anything else off. So we did add a form to handle deactivation. We didn't get to the creating of the deactivated page. And we didn't do these other things, which are the things that I think will go into the form save operation. So that's fine that these are left unchecked. I think that's a really good thing where we can pick up at the next stream session. So I do record all of these videos and I export them from Twitch and put them on YouTube. So if you want to refer back to something that I said or did, you are totally welcome to do that. I encourage it. Didn't have any questions tonight, which is fine. I plan to stream next week, March 27th would be the date of that. Again, Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, if you want to check it out. I'm also on social media, on Twitter as MB Layman, which is the same as my GitHub, you can see here. I have a website that's is at Matt Layman, where I write about various nerdy things like Vim, Python, how to do web development, those sort of topics. You can follow me on Twitch or on YouTube. Hit that like, subscribe button, whatever it is, and that way you know when I'm streaming in the future. I do also appreciate feedback. So if there's something that's really missing from this that you think would help make you learn better, I'm happy to provide some of that or accept some of that feedback and apply it to future streams. I think that's all I've got to show off for this evening. So with that, I'll bid you good night. Take care.